Hi, this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of The Contrarian. I am so happy to have back Ari Berman, who is Mother Jones' chief electoral and voting rights correspondent. Welcome, Ari.
Hey Jen, great to talk to you again. Thanks.
Good to talk to you too. It seems there is always a new frontier in the war against fair and unrigged elections. What is going on in Missouri? We've just gotten through Texas, California's responded. Now we turn to Missouri. I think it's Republican, overwhelmingly so already.
Yeah, I mean, it's never a dull time to be a voting rights correspondent these days. We're having to work overtime, but basically, Missouri was the next front in Trump's mid-decade gerrymandering scheme. So it started with Texas, as you know, demanding Texas redraw its maps for five new Republican seats, and then Trump went to Missouri, which, as you say, is already very Republican, already has a 6-2 advantage in the Republican House delegation, but they wanted to eliminate one more Democratic seat. I mean, all of this for one more seat. So they held a special legislative session. Again, Republicans weren't that crazy about doing this, but Trump basically bullied them into it. And they essentially eliminated the district of Emanuel Cleaver, one of two Democratic House members in the state, one of two Black Democratic House members in the state. And what they did is they took his district, which is largely composed of Kansas City, and they drew it 200 miles to the east to rural Missouri, which has almost nothing in common. And so that was the next front in Trump's redistricting war. It's not going to be the last front. They're moving on to Indiana, Ohio, Florida, other states. But it's just really indicative that the Texas thing got so much national attention when Democrats
Yeah.
fled the state. This was less dramatic. But it just goes to show you it's not stopping here. And one of my concerns is that as it gets less attention, it might make them easier to try to do this in other places.
No, there's a good legal challenge because my understanding of Missouri law is they're really only supposed to do it after the census. Do you think the Democrats will be successful in knocking this down?
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways they could challenge it. One way they could challenge it is through the courts, and I think they do have a pretty strong case there that mid-decade redistricting is unconstitutional. They also can do this kind of thing where they can gather enough signatures. They have to gather over 100,000 signatures in a short period of time. I think something like 3 months. But if they gather these signatures, they can then put the map to a vote, and the voters would have to approve it. And this is pretty unpopular in Missouri. And so it's very possible that voters will strike it down. And so they have multiple options to try to defeat it. I should also mention, Jen, there was another thing that Missouri Republicans did, which
Yes.
is that a lot of things have been passed through citizen-led ballot initiatives in Missouri. Things like protecting abortion rights and protecting union rights and making it easier to vote. Things like that were done through citizen-led initiatives. Missouri is one of about 20 so or states that have this right. The legislature also changed that process so that instead of needing a statewide majority to pass these kind of initiatives, you would need a majority in every single congressional district. The very congressional districts, they're gerrymandering, by the way. That means that essentially 5%, as few as 5% of voters, could block an initiative from passing. So this is also a really pernicious attack on democracy that has been kind of flying under the radar, but it's sort of like a dual attack on democracy. You gerrymander the districts to predetermine election outcomes. You also roll back ballot initiatives so that the voters can't have any kind of accountability or check on those gerrymandered legislatures.
So a single right-wing district, a single rural district, for example, 50.1% or 50.001% of people could block an initiative that's overwhelmingly popular with the people of Missouri.
Exactly. I mean, you could have something that's overwhelmingly popular in 7 of 8 districts, but for one reason or another, you get a majority in that one district and you can block it, which makes no sense. I mean, if you I don't know of any other state that has this kind of geographic requirement. And so it would make it very, very difficult to be able to do this because some of these areas are extremely right wing. And it's something that hasn't really been done anywhere else. But I guess it just goes to show you what Missouri politicians think of the will of the people right now.
Now, is the rule to change the rules going to go on the ballot itself, or is this just law now that the legislature has passed it?
Yeah, that also needs to go on the ballot. So it's
Right,
it's very possible that that the public could vote this down as well. So
right.
there's going to be some high profile elections in Missouri, a place that we don't normally think of when we talk about places that matter in terms of elections because it's such a Republican state now.
Well, that's a good way to drive the pro-democracy forces. And I would add, although this is a unique tactic, other states have tried to do the same thing by increasing the percentage that is necessary to pass a ballot initiative. For example, Ohio, Florida going to 60%. Now, sometimes those initiatives have still got past the 60%, but this is even more pernicious. This is even worse. Now, the other thing that is going on around the country is with no statutory basis whatsoever, the Justice Department is sending letters out to, I think, all of the states, but obviously with an eye to blue states, demanding their entire voter files, which include all kinds of information, social security numbers, really all kinds of data. And there's no statutory basis for this. States, under the Constitution, are supposed to run the elections. Now the government has gone further and they're suing two states that won't cooperate. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the Justice Department is suing Oregon and Maine, two blue states, of course, to try to get their unredacted voter data. And this is extremely unusual. First off, it's unusual for them to want this data in the first place. The Justice Department has never asked states in such a concerted way to get this kind of information. Then the fact that they're suing them is even more unusual. And it begs the question, why do they want this data? And my understanding is they want this data so they can share it with the Department of Homeland Security to run it through all these databases that are not designed for these purposes to try to find instances of illegal voting. Now, these are likely to be unsubstantiated instances of illegal voting, but nonetheless, they're going to come out and say, we found the voter fraud. See, Trump was right in 2020. And then they're going to try to do all these politically motivated prosecutions. They might try to intimidate people not to vote. They might put more pressure on states to remove people from the voter rolls. We have already seen Trump weaponize the Department of Justice in all sorts of different ways. There are calls to further weaponize the Department of Justice in the wake of the death of Charlie Kirk. And now we're seeing tangible ways that the department's being weaponized. It's one thing for the department to make threats, another thing for them to sue states and to single out blue states. So this is very dangerous. I imagine these states will fight it in court. I think they would have a very good chance of succeeding. You may remember, Jen, in Trump's first term, he tried to do something similar. He claimed that 3 million people voted illegally in California. That's why he
Yes.
lost the popular vote. Of course, there was no substantiation of that. But then you've had this quote unquote election integrity commission that was headed by Mike Pence and Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach. And they asked states for all of this data, and they were basically told no by red and blue states alone. The Secretary of State of Mississippi told Kobach to go jump in the Gulf of Mexico, back when we called it that. And so this has already been rejected once. I mean, the danger here, though, is that instead of a commission asking for it, it's the Department of Justice, right? And the Department of Justice has powers that a presidential advisory commission doesn't have. So I would imagine they're not going to stop with these two states.
And to your point about mistakes, remember we had the incident in Alabama, I believe, in which there were wild claims that there were all these illegal people on the rolls. And in fact, the data was incorrect. It hadn't kept up with people, for example, who had been naturalized. So when they go on these mass crusades and try to do enormous voter purges, it's very likely that they're going to hit people who have every right to vote.
Yeah.
But you know what? With Maine in the focus, I am sure that Susan Collins is going to be deeply concerned about this and is going to take
Yes.
care of it. So
Yeah,
we
she'll be
have
deeply
her to.
concerned. I mean, there's
Uh,
there's strong secretaries of state in both of these places, in
yes.
Maine and Oregon. So they're going to fight this. But that's a really good point you make, especially when they run this through these immigration databases. These immigration databases often flag people when they may have some interaction with the government and they're not a citizen. They're legal residents. These are not
Yes,
undocumented immigrants. These are legal residents, people with green cards. And then they naturalize. But the databases don't keep up with that naturalization. So you'll
right.
often see this happen in Texas, for example, these crazy headlines that all of these people are illegally registered to vote when in fact they are American citizens. But the problem is people see the headlines, right? And the headlines will
Yes,
go on Fox News and the headlines will go all over Twitter and be, hyped up by the likes of Elon Musk and people like that. And but then the fact checking will get far less attention, right? And
exactly.
so that's, I think, that the propaganda component here is so large because remember, this is being done in combination with lots of other things, right? Deployments of the National Guard and the military to
Exactly.
Democratic cities, of the fear of ICE engaging in racial profiling, which the Supreme Court has just said they could do, the possibility that ICE could be deployed to polling places, which is something that Steve Bannon has called for. So this is all part of a larger culture of intimidation that the Trump administration is trying to use with regards to all aspects of society and in particular voting.
And of course, declaring that the left is responsible for the murder of Charlie Kirk and going on a crusade to shut down or punish or persecute groups that have a left leaning ideology. So we are in dangerous times. Ari, thank you so much for keeping us abreast. Unfortunately, we're going to have you back again. And it's not because we don't like seeing you, it's because every time you come on, we are discussing another assault on democracy. But that's, I think, the world in which we live in. And we're going to see whether Democrats can mount an effective response in the courts, in peaceful demonstrations, ultimately at the ballot box in 2026. So thank you for everything you do. You actually are a pleasure to have on, and we do enjoy you. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much, Jen. Really appreciate it.